welcome. My name is Alan. I'm the host of the show, and it features April Crawford, who's a full-body open deep cast channel and best-selling author. You just go to Amazon, and April's got 10, all of which hit number 1 or 2, but we have a few other books coming, so stand by. And Veronicas is a causal plane entity. That's just our name. It's a label. I actually don't like these different labels. She's the one who handles all the readings. Oh, Veronica has done over 10,000, that's 10,000, telephone and in-person readings from people all around the world. That's a lot, 10,000, right? Hold on for April.
Hi, everyone. It's my turn to talk. I'm kind of liking this every week where I get to talk because for the past 25 years, I haven't really talked that much. We have some long-term clients that never really talked to me. So this is a nice little fraction of the week where I get to talk about things and how I feel about them. Today I want to talk about Osco and Ish. These are two energies that to me are very elf-like and imp-like. They came in maybe 20-some years ago writing. They would write poetry. They would write little jingles. That's how I call it. And they always seem to be in a little bit of competition with each other, especially with the writing, going back and forth. Osco always thought he was smarter than Ish, and Ish always thought he was smarter than Osco. And it ended up being Ish was the one that did most of the writing, and Osco sort of was just kind of there. But back and forth they went for a very long time, and then finally, maybe after 10 years or so, because I would be sort of semi-conscious when I do the automatic writing, they finally decided they wanted to try to come through me, which I thought they needed a lot of help with because they were just really different kind of energies. And I went out and let them come in, and again, they were pretty much in competition with each other, and Alan always offers anyone who comes in a beverage, being the host. And he asked them, he said, well, do you want to try some wine, or what would you like? And they asked for goat cheese. So the next time we had a session, Alan said to me, you got to stop at the store and get some goat cheese. And any of you who partake of goat cheese know that it comes in a little plastic thing and it's refrigerated. So I got it. I put it in the refrigerator. And before the session started, I sat it out on a plate, put it out. And I said, okay, here's the goat cheese in case anybody wants it. And we decided that we were going to give them some red wine. So they came in. Now, I wasn't there, but I get this from Alan. He told me about it afterward. They came in. They sipped a little bit of wine, which Veronica never eats or drinks anything, but there have been some energies that come in and eat and drink. And I'm always pretty particular because some things I don't like, and I don't want that taste in my mouth when I come back. But they had the red wine, but they didn't eat very much of the goat cheese. And I said, well, what happened with that? Did they like it, not like it? And apparently they thought that goat cheese should not be refrigerated, that it should be warm from the incarnations that they've had. So they were a little bit, I would say snooty about the whole thing. They decided they weren't going to eat it because it was cold. And I thought it was interesting after the fact to say, well, if it had been warm, maybe that would have been better. So after that, I always made sure I let it sit out, and eventually they did eat some of it. But they're very cute. They bicker back and forth. They almost like the Bickersons. They always have these little conversations between the two of them. And they've written some very interesting poetry. They've written some very interesting, like, limericks and rhymes. And they're very much, all about giving some good messages and some good things. And we haven't talked to them in a while. And Alan says he's probably afraid to talk to them because they'll probably give him the business. And one time we had a session with them, and we didn't have any wine in the house. So I said, well, here's some sparkling grape juice. Don't give them this. And when I got back, Alan was like, oh, my God. They called me on this immediately, that this is not wine. This is what are you trying to pull? It was hysterical. So even though they were using my taste buds, they could, which I thought was interesting, because how would they taste it if they, they don't really have mouths, they're using mine. So I found the whole situation rather interesting, because they were eating and drinking. I don't remember eating or drinking anything, but I did have a little residual taste of the cheese in my mouth. And they, were doing this, and I wasn't there. So every time we have some kind of experience, and believe me, there's been a lot of really great experiences, odd experiences, and just plain interesting experiences, that I think I'm going to share from my perspective of it a little bit every week, so that you all can get a perspective of how it is to be a deep trance channel and what I perceive in the whole thing.
Thank you, April. And I'll say, as far as Osco and Ish is the lead guy, Ish and Osco, but it sounds better, Osco and Ish, I think. A couple things. One is, if you get the newsletter, there's actually 2 series of newsletters, and one of them features poems by Ish. And a lot of people have commented on them. But there's also a Kindle book. It's a Kindle book written by Ish and Osco. And so if you're interested, and it has a lot of their stuff, which is incredible. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you can check that out. And I think you don't even need a Kindle. I think you could probably read it on any computer. For now, I'm going to wait for Veronica to come in, which usually doesn't take very long, because she knows we're doing these things. Although she's not very interested in my, long-winded explanations. But here is Veronica.
Well, good day, everyone. It is Veronica. And pray tell, dear Alan, where is your opening question?
Okay, this question came in via email, and I'm paraphrasing it because it was quite a long email. And the basic question was, if souls reincarnate, how do we be able to feel the comfort that they offer? I mean, this question does come up from time to time, like, if you've got a loved one who crossed over, and now they're reincarnated, A, can they contact you? And B, when you die physically, will they be there?
Well, first of all, when you think about this subject, you need to back yourself up from the linear concepts of it. That you have to understand you're all eternal beings, and you can be doing many things at the same time while not incarnate. All of you define it by the linear day, where it takes so much time to do each element as it moves along. If you have, say, an aunt that crossed over and you were deeply close to her, and you're wondering, well, what happens if she reincarnates? An aspect of her can reincarnate, and the consciousness that knew you would stay in the eternal space, because this energy knows clearly that you depend upon this energy. Those who are not physical can do many things at the same time and not skip a beat. So when thinking about this, it's important not to think linearly. It's important to think eternally, and the ability for someone to stay with you, even while having other experiences, is very true. So don't think if they reincarnate, okay, they're not suddenly not available to me, nor will they meet me. It's not the case. The soul is very flexible, and it's easy to do multiple things. Do not worry about this. If you have an aunt that you really loved, and you say, well, if I'm going to cross, I really wanted her to be the first person I see, she can do that while still having other experiences. We realize that's sometimes a hard thing to swallow, but give it some time and truly ponder it, and we think that you'll come to some understanding.
Thank you, Veronica. Now I have one of my famous lists, and this is actually runs around the 2010, 2011 time frame that I wrote these down as subjects, some of which we discussed, some which we did not. But one of these ones on my list, which is from 10/05/10, it's being in the present. So could you talk a little bit about why it's good or at least useful for people who are physically incarnated to be in the present as opposed to living in the past or living in the future? The power is in the present kind of thing.
Many who are incarnate make the error of living in the past or projecting into the future. What you really have in linear reality is your present moment. What's past is past, and what's future is future. You can't do anything outside the moment that you're in. That's where the creative aspect becomes, that's where the canvas is, and that's where all the colors and paints are. So if you find yourself dwelling in a past moment, it's incredibly important to say, this is the past. And if I want to change it, which is why most dwell in the past, because they're hoping to change it in some way, shape, or form, I have to be present. And therefore, I have to let go of this white-knuckled grip I have on my past, and neither the mistakes that were in it or the good things that were in it or things that you're trying to fix. You have to be present to do any of that. And then many will worry about their future. They'll be in the present moment, but go through all the scenarios that could go wrong in the tomorrow. And doing that just handicaps you, makes it so that you can't function. We think that the present moment is the only viable source of creation. So when you find yourself lamenting the past or worrying about the future, you really need to take a good look and shake the rug out and say, wait a minute, I have to be right here, right now. That's the only way to soothe the past, and that's the only way to create the future. Dwelling in the future and dwelling in the past will not do anything for you. And you'll end up finding yourself circling around issues and dramatics that no longer are good for you. So decide every day, if something presents itself, to say, nope, I'm not going to slide into the past. Nope, I'm not sliding into the future. I'm going to stay right here. Because if I'm right here, then I do have some control over what goes on. Past and future, no, you won't. So it is something to think about and remember as you move through each day.
Thank you, Veronica. This next one I had on my list was something you said, either to me or to a group, and said, you are valuable. Now, when I first started all this stuff, I said, wait a minute, there's 7 billion people. There are hundreds and hundreds of billions of planetary systems in our galaxy, and there's hundreds and hundreds of planetary, thousands, millions, and billions even, in other galaxies. So how can an individual be valuable? And one of my own conclusions was, and I think I asked about this one time and a long time ago, was personally, I think on the one hand, it seems like we got to be insignificant given the math. But on the other hand, I had a feeling that we're incredibly important and significant as individuals. So, Veronica, are we?
Well, it is nice to know you have a grasp of how things are. Each of you are incredibly important. We talked last week about being the pebble. You say, well, how could one person change everything? But if each of you, in your individuality, decide that you're going to change behavior or you're going to change how you think about something, that is incredibly powerful. Each of you have the ability to change the world because one at a time, because it's linear, is how it works. But you have to, all of you, be completely aware that you're here. You are a fragment of a much higher power source. And you're here to move the color on the canvas, to color it the way you see fit, and put your energy into it in an individualistic manner. Otherwise, it would be sort of a homogeneous conglomerate of energy, and it didn't turn out that way. The experience is individualistic, created that way for a reason, so that each of you feel the power of your own soul source. Each of you feel the ability to make a difference in a world where, yeah, there's 7 billion people. But if each of you recognize your internal personal power, it changes the dynamic quite a bit. So we only ask all of you to think about that and to not feel diminished just because you're incarnate in one body. Feel expanded. Connect with your soul. Decide that, okay, I'm part of a bigger unit here, and I am emanating that energy. Therefore, that's important, and I can do something. So we would beseech all of you to embrace your individuality, but also understand in that you do have incredible power. Decide to think about it and decide to do it.
Thank you, Veronica. And I have a related topic that I wrote down, and bear in mind again, these are things I wrote down. This particular one was in 2011. And what I wrote down as a topic was action versus reaction. So, Veronica, talk a little bit about the benefits of action versus reaction.
Well, when you react, you are into someone else's energy and not your own. It is much better to act within your own energy because then it is your own energy. And reacting can often be emotional, it can often be irrational, and it can often be way off center from what's really going on. So it's important to stabilize yourself, put both feet on the ground, and act through your life. Reacting is sort of secondhand energy because you're reacting to someone else's energy. So decide every day that, okay, that person's going to throw some energy at me, but I'm not going to react to it. I'm going to think about it and then act, own inner core perceptions, and perhaps the outcome will be different. Reacting gives power to everyone else. Acting gives power to yourself.
Thank you, Veronica. And I'm looking down my list, and there's one thing I wrote here, and it was just, the topic was the path to joy. So if somebody wants to get on the path to joy, what do you have to say about that?
The joy does not include self-pity, self-absorption, or self-denial. The path to joy has to be open. It has to be without conditions. And it has to include a decision not to dwell on the negative. That even if you're presented in the negative and you're up to your chin in the negative, you have to extract yourself from it and find the path that leads to your joy. We realize that's a tall order. And most are floundering about just trying to put one foot in front of the other. But we'd say every day decide that you're going to be happy and find one thing that makes you smile. Tall order, again, we realize, but it is important to do. You can dwell in negativity easily. Why not try to dwell in joy instead?
Thank you, Veronica. Same time frame, but I mentioned earlier in another episode that one of the reasons I was coming here, I was told, was to learn to give and receive emotions more freely. Being kind of like the poker-faced intellectual. I struggled with that. And I see that in October 18, 2011, I wrote down something somebody said, probably you, Veronica, said, emotions are a wild card. So can you talk a little bit about emotions and there's, after knowing me, I got this intellect, emotional barrier, and how both of those can work together to the benefit.
Well, there are the two perspectives. There are those who are extremely intellectual. There are those who are extremely emotional. There are those who blend the two things together. And the intellectual people, although they're, brilliant in most ways, some of them don't have the slightest clue about how emotion works. And then there are extremely emotional people who get so caught up in the harshness of it that they can't think straight. They can't have an intellectual moment because they're too busy being emotional. The two things weren't meant to be so separate. They were meant to work together, hand in hand. So if you find yourself being extremely intellectual poker face, you need to decide to at least explore and consider an emotional perspective. And if you can't muster it up yourself, find someone who is emotional and have conversation, or have some dramatic interactions where you can observe and assess how the emotion works so you have a better understanding of it. If you're extremely emotional, it's important to govern that within yourself as much as you can by bringing in some intellectual concepts to define what the emotion's all about. Now, we realize these are a bit broad, but we are on a radio show where we can't really do it individualistically as it needs to be done. But we are giving you some basic tools to at least think about.
Thank you, Veronica. And now's the time of the broadcast where we ask Veronica to give her message to you and the world.
The sun came up today. Whether it was cloudy or whether it was not readily available, but you are on a planet. You are in a solar system. The sun rises and the sun sets. Whether you can see the sun or not physically is probably irrelevant. What you need to see and feel is the energy of the sun, the broad power of electricity that it creates. And to be able to see the sun rise within yourself every day, whether it physically does or not, is important. So if you have a blizzard going on, or there's bad weather going on, and there's no sun to be seen anywhere, it's important to internally allow the sun to rise. Because under the light of the sun, in its concepts, is the ability to create whatever you want. The sun is life-giving. The sun brightens things up so that you can see more clearly. The warmth of the sun on your skin is a sublime moment. You can create that in your mind, even if it's, raining hard or snowing up to your knees. You can still create it. And what we're basically saying is that the sun creates an atmosphere of hope. When the sun rises, everyone's like, ooh, it's a new day. It's a new opportunity to begin again. That needs to be filed away in your thought process. Even if the sun is not physically shining, it needs to shine within you internally. Decide that you're going to allow that to happen, no matter what is occurring. If you have some high dramatic or some negativity that's going on, take a moment to allow the sun to rise within your energy. Allow the light to pour out of you through your eyes and through your personality. That is what all should aspire to. Allowing the sun, metaphorically, to shine through you. So decide every day that's what you're going to do. And even if you're met with abrupt negativity or you're met with someone who's just impossible, still let the sun shine. Because maybe a teeny little bit of it will rub off on this extremely negative person and they'll have an epiphany. Always hope for epiphany. So tomorrow, when you know the sun is rising, allow it to rise in you as well.
Thank you, Veronica. And as I like to say, that concludes the interesting part of this radio and podcast. If you'd like to find out more about April Crawford or Veronica, you can go to Amazon.com and search April Crawford. You can go to YouTube, search April Crawford or Inner Whispers TV. And you can also just go to April's website, which is aprilcrawford.com. Any of those will probably give you also the opportunity to inquire about talking directly, one-on-one, with Veronica, as well over 10,000 readings have also happened. And why not? So anyway, thank you very much. We see you next week. Best wishes.